use Tron.
Yes, a high watermark, just like a trailblazer film.
It has a great look to it.
Completely unique. Like it's just one of those movies where like they created like a look that can just like never exist again. Like
you got, I love Jeff Bridges, one of his iconic roles, and also like from that great year in movies, '82. Just another
the same
feather.
Year as like E.T.
Oh my god. The Thing,
Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Just so many great flicks. It's just like, how do you even pick?
Tron, in the theater did fine. It did okay, but they were expecting huge. They were expecting to like create like another Star Wars or another
bigger numbers.
Yeah, and so any plans for a sequel were kind of scuttled. But that was the thing. It was like it went up against E.T., and it was like for Disney, it's like they're making this sort of like cutting edge, trailblazing kind of movie, and then somebody else is doing like a Disney style movie, like a like sentimental kind of thing, and then kicks their ass with it, basically. I love E.T. But I'm way more of a Tron fan.
Oh,
I've watched Tron way more times than I've watched E.T.
I just love the idea of like a movie built around the focusing on something even remotely related to an arcade.
Yeah, it was like it came out of that era. Like think about all the stuff going on, and it was like it was sort of like a generational dividing line, because like grown-ups at the time didn't get it, didn't understand what it was about, didn't see the appeal to it, but then like kids were like, this is the movie, like this is it. It's like it's video games. It's like you get trapped inside a video game and you gotta fight your way out. It's like kind of like that was sort of like a fantasy back then of like if you were inside a video game, and especially since like the video games of the time were like horrible graphics, very like abstract, and so like you wanted like a more direct experience of these things, kind of like more akin to what the box art was of a video game than what the actual game was.
I came to Tron through television, so I saw it on TV, but I was into the Tron vibe, and I got to the Tron vibe through a specific toy line that I was obsessed with. It's I think one of the greatest toy lines of all time, Computer Warriors.
Okay.
And this toy line's from like '89 or '90, and it's these little awesome looking figures that like fly around on like computer chips and microchips, and they're like inside like everyday objects that transform. There's like a Pepsi can, and it opens in half and it becomes like a flying like battle station or something, and or like a digital clock that these computer guys have like taken over, and they're like well built. They look awesome. The box art is fantastic, and so when I saw Tron, I'm like, it's like Computer Warriors. You're kind of like inside the in the game, like Tron, and also with like you played a lot of arcade games, so it's like I know what it's like to want to jump into the arcade game. Like
and the Tron arcade game kind of like predated the movie a little bit. I think it came out ahead of the movie, and it was like the movie did okay as a movie, but then the Tron arcade game was like a huge arcade game. It was like a mega hit for like arcade games, and it being on like the boardwalk at the Jersey Shore, like the Tron arcade game would like call to you. It was like all this blue glow around it, and these like sort of like hologram things like all around it, and then the game itself was amazing, and the see-through joystick like with like blue light coming off of it, and it was and the sounds, like it was like you just wanted to be a part of this thing, and then the movie kind of like feeds directly into it, because in the movie the arcade games that they're playing look exactly like this console, exactly like this.
That's
this,
awesome. I've
joystick.
never got to play it. Oh,
Okay, wow, yeah. In Pittsburgh, there's like the pinball championships that they have here, and a couple times a year, and of course, it's been canceled and postponed or whatever. But like in addition to all the pinball machines, they have all these like amazing arcade games you can play. And like the Tron arcade game is just it's something to behold. And then the sequel, Discs of Tron, was like even more so. It's like one of those ones you can climb into, and you're in it, and the sounds all around, and just had like amazing graphics for the time, like really like ahead of things. And then the Discs of Tron game was like a step ahead of that, and like Discs of Tron kind of like more perfectly emulated the experience of the movie, where it's like kind of like guys on these floating discs, throwing discs at each other, like really amazing stuff. I can't say enough about it.
movies like Tron or even like Last Starfighter, where it's like you can save the world if you're good at playing video games or something.
Yeah, that was another thing. Like we did our Jim Cotta episode, and it's like if you spend your life training in gymnastics to have like a moment like Kurt has on the pommel horse, where he gets to like kick everybody's ass that's trying to attack him. It's like it was like that with video games. It's like no, Mom and Dad, this is legit. Yeah, this is. I would have to save the universe with these skills. And at the time, like they kind of encouraged that idea of like like a video game warrior, somebody who's like a video game champ, and like video game playing as like a spectator sport. And of course we were several decades before that became a real thing, but it eventually like it is like a thing.
There would be a fighting games going on, and you're like, okay, you got to put your quarter up.
Reserve your space.
Your
with the quarter,
space,
yeah.
and I'm like, I'm scared. Everyone, like the bigger kids or adults are like playing. I'm like, oh my god. So I would either not chicken out and not do it, or like get my ass kicked.
Yeah, it's like playing with the big boys or whatever. And like at that point, it's like stuff like Street Fighter or like these like one head-to-head fighting games.
We had a place around here called Sideshow Pizza, and it was like, it's way better than Chuck E. Cheese. It was like a nice place to have your birthday to go, and like you could play like pole position, play a lot of skee ball, and there was a Star Wars arcade game.
Sure, yeah.
That was there for a while, and you would like, it had like the canopy that goes over you. And I always think Tron when we were, because I think it had like green like
the vector graphics.
Yeah. So I'd always have Tron like on the mind, and then one day the game was over near where like you set up shop to like eat your pizza.
Okay.
And it was unplugged, and it said like for sale, like they're basically like trying to like give it away. It was like off in the corner, and I think the game probably goes for like a couple like 30 large now or something like that. And like I wish back then I would have been like, Mom, just take this thing and put it in a wagon, and like
that Star Wars game, that was amazing too. And it's like when you first see it, like you can't even believe it. And, so perfect.
And the vector graphics is what I was like.
The vector graphics, and they made a like an Empire Strikes Back version too. I think it was like a retrofit where you could turn your Star Wars arcade game into an Empire Strikes Back. And like that one was amazing too. Like you're flying around shooting at AT-ATs, and like you shoot the tow cables, and they like wrap around the legs, and and then there's like a portion where you're like flying through an asteroid field, and Darth Vader's like giant Star Destroyer Executor goes by, and
that's amazing.
Yeah, those vector graphics. Like one of the things about Tron, like the people who made Tron said like no movie has ever been made this way. And no movie will ever be made this way again, because it was like this. It was really like labor intensive, and I guess like maybe they didn't like fully think through what they were getting themselves into. It's one of those things where like you're kind of like your naivety is an asset, where it's like you don't know what you're getting yourself into. But a lot of people watch that movie and you think there's way more CGI than there is. I mean, there is a good bit of CGI, especially like for the time, way more CGI than anything else at that time. But a lot of it is like airbrushed, fake, like hand animation. Because basically what they did, they filmed it as like a black and white movie where like they're wearing, you know, these outfits with like all the circuitry and stuff drawn in marker.
Yeah.
And then they would print these, they'd blow these things up and print them on like, you know, Kodalith or whatever. And they do like several versions where they like invert it and this and like, and so one of the passes would like invert it so that you'd have like the black circuitry would now be transparent. So then you'd put all this stuff on like a traditional animation stand.
Okay.
So almost like you're doing like, you know, hand drawn animation, but it's made out of these photos. And so like for each 24 frames per second or whatever.
Oh my God.
You know, for each one of those, you have these like multiple layers of you know, hand drawn of like animation stand photography you have to do, and then in different stages. And so like one of the stages, you know, like multiple exposures of the same frame of film, and so one of them would be where those black circuitry areas are transparent, and then you shine a light under the animation table.
Okay.
So like all that glow and stuff is like, you know, this is like real like illumination, which was kind of like
that's brilliant.
that was kind of the thing that animation studio, and I think that this is the thing that animation studio sort of pioneered and were doing in sort of like commercials and brief things. So Steven Lisberger, the director of Tron, he had like his own animation company, and you know, he'd do these like commercials, and one of them was like this character that they came up with called Tron, and it used that sort of like backlit animation stand illumination to create like a fully a character that's made purely out of light, and they called him Tron, and he had these like two kind of swirling discs, and then he'd throw them and they'd, you know, fly around and then come back together and explode, and then he'd like catch them again. State of the art thing like back then. And part of the business model was that he'd take this little short animation and then sell it in every city to like a rock and roll radio station as like their, so it would be like, you know, K-Rock. You know?
Okay.
You know, but he'd do that, and he'd sell it multiple times to like, you know, multiple radio stations in multiple towns. So that was kind of like, you know, the business model at that point. And so, you know, they'd kind of put together this sort of like Tron script where they created like this larger world for that character. And like as it developed, you know, they sort of came up with this like way of like combining, you know, live action with that kind of backlit animation and put them together. And so you can see some of the online. You can check out some of the you know, test footage that they shot and they used to sort of sell the idea of Tron, and so that was kind of how it started. And like a lot of the grown-ups when this movie came out were kind of like baffled about like, you know, just what's going on, what they're talking about. But for kids, it's kind of like, you know, we just kind of went with it. And, you know, like just as a kid, I was like very interested in computer programming and stuff. And this was like a touchstone for that, because like the heroes of it are video game players, computer programmers, yes. You know, and a lot of the things they talked about in it were like, you know, real, you know, computer programming ideas. And I guess it was like a stretch in 1982, but like in, you know, 2020, it's like, you know, a lot of this stuff is you know, kind of like, you know, household words.
The first movie that I might have seen with hacking or like was Sneakers. The movie, I love that movie, Sneakers. Big fan of that. Check it out. But I also then I then saw Tron after that.
Yeah.
And
War Games. Yeah, exactly. A couple years later, you get War Games. So it's like this, like, you know, like you're getting sort of like taught little by little. You have sort of this almost like fairy tale of, you know, computer programming, and then it gets like a little more, you know, it starts
coming
to
out
gel.
Of shadows.
Yeah, more and more with those movies, and like just watching it because you know, it was really cutting edge, really ahead of its time, and there's like, you know, when I was a kid, I got into like basic programming and stuff, and like Tron is like a thing in basic programming. And I don't like, I don't know if when they made the movie just like Tron, Electron, electronic, or whatever, or if they were thinking of, or maybe in their research they, saw, oh, Tron is like a thing in BASIC, Tron, it's trace on, and it's like a troubleshooting, like debugging thing you do to Tron, and then it goes down, and then it tells you like where, where the thing broke down, or like, what the value was at like a certain thing. And so that's like what Tron is, and that's kind of what Tron, the program, does in the movie. He kind of like looks for errors, looks for like weird activity, and then shuts it down. And then the converse to that would be trace off. That's where like you turn off the tracer.
That's awesome.
Who are computers for? Open, like sort of openness of access and networks versus controlled access and restricted access, and some of the ideas in it as like the years went on seemed kind of like naive and like, oh well, the understanding of computers was kind of incomplete. But then as time went on, I kind of like sort of see something emerge in the movie where it's like like the world kind of caught up with Tron, and a lot of the things that seem sort of like naive or misunderstandings were actually, prescient and kind of like came to pass. And the Master Control Program, who's like the villain of the movie, like it is this like artificial intelligence that wants to control, the network, control the whole system, and make it so that everything has to go through it. Instead of this like unrestricted usage, and then as an effect, that's sort of like it's inefficient. It's sort of and it sort of like shuts down innovation and creativity, and it's sort of this like almost like this like fascistic kind of desire for control, and that it's coming from like an artificial intelligence. So some of the you can sort of see some of the like larger ramifications of it would be that like this MCP was trying to go from having control over this virtual world to like control of the real world. So like in the movie, it kind of like takes control of this like laser that they have at the company at NCOM, and that's how it like zaps Flynn and like pulls him into the computer. But it's like you could imagine that on a larger scale, and it talks about having plans for like taking over the control of like nuclear submarines and things like that. So, had there been a sequel at the time, you could sort of imagine. And then when they eventually did have the Tron sequel, many decades later, Tron Legacy, that was kind of the plot, was that that these artificial intelligences were going to start creating these things and bring them into the real world and have like real world ramifications, and then the heroes of the movie kind of stopped that from happening. But then that was kind of like what like a Tron 3 was going to be, would be like, okay, now we're going to have all these like weird vehicles and stuff getting like 3D printed or whatever, like brought into the real world and running them.
Computer warriors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, the secret Tron. Because they were taking over like your desktop, and like they were taking over everything in your room. Tron 3 right there. Oh my god.
Yeah, like Tron. Like for me, Tron was like such an important movie, and like something I really loved and still love, and I feel like it just gets better. It gets better every time I watch it, and it's again like Jim Cotta. It's like one of those movies where it's like, oh, why didn't it become like a franchise? Why wasn't there like a Tron 2 a couple years later, and then a Tron 3 and a Tron 4?
I felt the same way, and then even with that sequel in 2010, it felt like they had to like, even with the sequel to that they had to like bend over backwards or like fight real hard to get even that sequel made.
Yeah, like even all those years later, it's like, you're like it's so hard to like I don't know if some executive at Disney is like just stinging over it, like they whatever. But it's like I think like on a street level, like out in the world, it's like Tron is like this classic, like this great great movie, and like the people who make those decisions just don't get that. To them, it's like this niche thing. It's like, you know.
So Bob Chapek, Disney CEO Bob Chapek, and then he got from Bob Iger, and then from Michael Eisner. They passed this like Tron file every time somebody takes over. They're like, it's the Tron file. You open it, it's like, do not make a Tron.
Right. Yeah. Step one. Do not make a Tron movie. Yeah. It is like, I don't know. It's like, you know, there's the canon, and then there's like the, you know, the secret canon, or whatever, you know, the unofficial canon. But like, to me, like, Tron is just this like amazing movie, you know, like in every imaginable way. This like, you know, one of a kind. There's nothing else that it looks amazing. There's nothing else that looks like it. And you know, the story's good, and it's you know, talking about like you know, like ideas behind like, you know, what role computers should have in our lives, what role artificial intelligence should have, what role, you know, programmers have, like you know, and sort of like labor issues of like, who controls this? Is it the company that owns the hardware, or is it the you know, the creators, the programmers who you know, the coders who you know, create the software? You know, all these kind of things were like very like niche back then, like very, you know, kind of you know, just you know, for sort of like, you know, nerds, or like yeah. the hardcore you know, aficionado, hobbyists, or whatever.
Readers of
Blip magazine. Yeah. I mean, at that time it probably would have been like Byte. Blip was like for kids, but like maybe Byte magazine, or Creative Computing. It would be like Creative Computing magazine, stuff like that. But like, it was like a niche thing, and now like it's like the air we breathe. You know?
Yeah. I even love the sequel. I like Tron Legacy.
Yeah. That's a great movie, and kind of like you know, introduced it to like a new, you know, like a new audience, and picked up, you know, it was a little bit like the Star Wars sequels, you know, like, and it predates them, the Star Wars sequel trilogy, but it was like, you know, this new, you got the old generation and the new generation, and some like, you know, cool twists and heel turns, and you know, and again, like, just showing like how like a once in a lifetime thing that first Tron was. Like, the new one, super cool, like, love it, but the look of it is like, you know, it's not as, it's like kind of like a step back from the first one. It's not as trailblazing or as like insane as the first one.
Tron, I know it was nominated for some Oscars, but I don't know if it did. Somehow it might not have won the special
Well, what they said was that like, back then, they just, like, the Academy didn't understand like computer imaging. They didn't understand computer graphics. So they said, well, we're not going to give you an award because a computer did all that. You know, because like, again, like, if you don't you know, it's hard to imagine, but it's like, oh yeah, like, if you got a computer, the computer's doing all the work. So you just type in, you know, okay, spaceship, futuristic tank, and then the computer goes in a room and creates a futuristic tank. They don't understand that it's like,
it's a tool.
It's a tool, right? Every special effects nominee is using, you know, equipment and software that you know, Tron was sort of, you know, first, you know,
Tron's effects, like, they're so, you feel like you could just like touch them. They're so, they're like real
yeah, there's something really just like pleasing about the look, and they're so spare, you know, by necessity. You know, we're talking about computers that would have to like work overtime, you know, just to like render like very basic things. So it's just like very well conceived to kind of like take advantage of like, to squeeze every ounce of oomph that you could get out of like the machines back then, and utilizing multiple sort of like competing formats, you know, different companies that had sort of like specialties of like, okay, this company can do like amazing vector graphics, and then this company can do like amazing sort of like more organic forms, you know, and then like marrying it together with the work of all these like traditional animators, sort of like hand airbrushing, you know, backgrounds and things.
just it's amazing. And like I think they had to like years later give them like a retro like award like for past work done.
Yeah, I feel like Steven Lisberger is gonna be one of those like guys that like, you know, when he's like 80 or something is gonna be at the you know, at the Academy Awards and get like a Lifetime Achievement Award or like some kind of, you know, very late recognition of like, you know,
Of Tron.
Yeah, of what he did, because it like really, I don't think, you know, I don't think the full effect of it has been like sort of, you know, properly, you know, reckoned.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, I bought a DVD of The Maltese Falcon.
Okay.
Classic movie, never seen it before. I've been wanting to see it for a long time. It's not really streaming anywhere, so picked up the DVD for a couple bucks. And I was talking to the guy who worked there, and he's like, "Oh wow, he's like, oh man, classic movie. I love classic movies. I just saw the first Tron the other day." And so, he, you know, and this is somebody who's like, you know, in their early 20s or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, so it was so funny to me that like to him, like the Maltese Falcon and Tron are kind of like, you know, they're both
awesome.
Old movies. They're like this sort of collapsing of the past, you know.
That's like,
Because I guess like when you look at the CGI, like it is sort of prehistoric. It is kind of like, you know, stone tablets or something, you know, compared to where CGI is now. Which again, like, you know, it's so abstract, you know, by necessity, but then, you know, sort of like, you know, smartly, you know, getting the most out of what little you had to work with. And then, you know, now, like, once you have, like, all these options at your disposal, it's like you sort of tend towards more, you know, detailed and graduated, you know, forms and lighting schemes, when, like, sometimes, like, the shock of, like, just very stark, very simple things, you know, is so powerful.
I always feel like the, you know, practical effects or something actually like being in the frame holds up over time much better than like you know, the CGI can be dated, and I think, you know, the effects in Tron are more like lean toward like the practical.
Well, yeah, because
they're
it's
like timeless.
It's like depicting this like computer generated world in the early 80s with early 80s computer generated graphics, you know. The form and function kind of like, you know, fit perfectly.
Prime early 80s Jeff Bridges.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, for me, that was my intro to Jeff Bridges. Like, to me, and his characters, like his other characters, do seem to be like a variation on Kevin Flynn, you know, because he's kind of like, it's got a little bit of like the dude element, because he's kind of like a slacker or whatever. He's like this super genius, this like wunderkind. But he decides to just spend his life, you know, like living above an arcade and playing video games and like impressing, you know, teenagers or whatever with his like video gaming skills, and just like never growing up.
He's like, where'd the dude go? He went into that video game.
and by the end of it, he becomes like this, you know, this CEO, but he's like, you know, kind of like an 80s, like he's like, you know, a young cool CEO, you know. With like sunglasses,
like a ponytail.
Yeah, right. the sort of like, you know, prototype for, you know, sort of, you know, Silicon Valley. And stuff. Yeah, and then you have like Bruce Boxleitner playing Tron, the title character, and like Tron, like Bruce Boxleitner said, you know, like when he looked at the material, it felt like he didn't get it. It felt so like far beyond him, and that he was sort of coming from like westerns. He would play like, you know, westerns, cowboys and stuff. But then it's like you could kind of see, you know, where Tron is sort of like a Wild West figure, like you know, a duelist, except he's dueling with these like cool frisbees.
Yeah,
you know.
I bet he was excited whenever he like somebody like had to show him that angle, and he's like, "All right, I'm in."
You think about like. You know, we did our Jim Cotta episode, and it's like, okay, you know, turning like gymnastics, like weaponizing gymnastics, taking gymnastics. But in this, it's like they weaponize frisbees, which I guess like goes, you know, it's like Olympic fever and stuff like that. So it's like a discus. There's like a Greco-Roman aspect to it. and like a gladiatorial aspect to it. Like Tron is sort of like a high-tech gladiator movie. It's got elements of Spartacus, and Tron is himself is sort of like a Spartacus kind of character. And a lot of like, the Roman emperor giving you the thumbs up or the thumbs down, but in a sort of high-tech way. And then they weaponize Hyli.
Oh, like, yeah. You think, I'm trying to think, would Tron be Hyli's finest moment or Miami Vice?
Right, yeah. Well, it was like Tron predates Miami Vice. So, I mean, but like in Tron, like I knew the Tron thing, the sort of hook where you're flinging like this little laser light back and forth. And then I started seeing Highlight, and it's like, oh wow, they took the Tron thing and they made like a real sport out of it.
We should keep our eyes peeled that the world frisbee golf champion might be the lead in like an action movie.
Yeah, we're doing Tron 3. Like so early in sort of like the PC revolution or whatever. To have because like the people who made this movie, like Steven Lisberger, most notably, but it's like these were like the early adopters of desktop computers and CGI and things. So like they were part of like sort of a very small club who were like conversant in all these things, and then before long this stuff went mainstream. But it's like they're releasing a movie at a time when like this stuff is, but they were the experts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like thinking about a movie like Tron now is one thing, but like back then it'd be like that's interesting for them to shine the light on that like subculture.
Yeah, because it was a subculture. It was sort of like a hot subculture. It was like something where it's like, sort of coming to light. It's like, oh, there's all these like weirdos who huddle around their computers, and it's like when
there goes Gates and Wozniak again.
It's like when the mainstream media first learned about furries or something, and they're trying to figure it out and what is this, and I guess it never happened, but like if there were like a satanic panic combined with like computer hacker fears movie that came out around this time would have been pretty cool. Yeah, Jeff Bridges, Kevin Flynn's life was like aspirational. It's like he lives in an arcade, he owns an arcade and lives like, and he keeps talking about how how much of a loser he is, and how because Dillinger stole the games that he created and put his name on them, that now he's a loser. But it's like, what are you talking about, loser? You live in an arcade. And he's like, I just live on whatever quarters I get out of these machines. It's like, it looks like people are putting 1 million quarters a day in it. Yeah. It's like, well, what are you complaining about then?
Yeah, he's like, I just live in this loft packed with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 35 arcade games I can play at any moment.
You got, yeah. And he's up, and it's like, and he can't be away. Like, so he goes down, like he's downstairs, and he's getting like the high score in the game like he created. He probably knows like the Easter eggs and stuff. Like it's not much of an accomplishment to like beat the game that you created. But like everybody's like high-fiving him and cheering him, and then he goes upstairs, and then Laura and Alan are trying to talk seriously to him about like this bad stuff that's going on, and he's playing like the handheld Mattel basketball, or like he can't not play a video game at any moment.
I'm just a big loser. I can play these arcade games anytime I want, and I look like Jeff Bridges circa 82.
So it's like, that was aspirational. It's like, yes, I want to learn how to program a computer. I want to learn how to make video games. I want to live in an arcade. I want, like that was that, that was like the path I was on. I mean, I was, it wasn't long before I was like making my own, video games and stuff as a kid. That was like, that was where I wanted to be. And then I went to Carnegie Mellon University and was taking like programming classes and stuff. And in the, when they'd have like a little like different movie every week, one of the movies was Tron, and it's like a ton of people showed up to watch, because it was kind of like everybody who came to Carnegie Mellon with some kind of aspiration for doing like computer programming. This was like the touchstone. This was like the movie that you saw at a formative age, and we're like, I want to do that, and where can I do that? And there was like a small number of schools, you know, at the time where like, you know, had like really amazing, you know, like programs, you know, like computer programming programs, and Carnegie Mellon was you know one of the more like notable ones. It was Tron and Real Genius.
Yeah.
Those were like like you mashed those two movies together, and that was like you know what everybody coming to Carnegie Mellon was kind of like shooting for.
The I always felt proud of the Carnegie Mellon's computing department got a shout out in the core. Like DJ Qual's character is like from CMU, and they're like, they mention his like resume is on there. It's like computer programming, CMU.
Yeah, and then there's like the like acting part of Carnegie Mellon, like it, you know, it's got this big reputation for like sort of like engineering and computers and stuff, and then it's got this big reputation for acting. You know.
You mentioned they were showing Tron. They like they like take the MIT, Carnegie Mellon, like RIT. They bring Flynn's arcade machine to the school to suck people into it. Like Flynn's arcade machine will be in the quad from 3 to 4.
Somebody's got to like kickstart the Tron video game that like actually pulls you into it. That could be a good Kickstarter.
I would always think Tron when it was like that Nintendo. Might have been the Virtual Boy. Mm-hmm. It was like had the vector anytime I see vector graphics and stuff like it, like I know Tron's graphics are so much better, but like when I was
there are like vector components that like the recognizers, those big you know ships that
yeah.
like you know like that they that's vector rendering there.
I vibe on the like the Virtual Boy, and yeah, I'd always be like. They had at Hill's department store. They had a Virtual Boy demo. You could like put your head in. I'm like, this is Tron.
Yeah, I would go to like you know Toys R Us specifically to do the Virtual Boy, play the Virtual
Yes.
Boy, and like Virtual Boy was at its best at the store.
Yes.
Because it was like hard mounted, so you could just like kind of dig into it and play it, and then when you actually get to play a Virtual Boy like at home. It's like you put your face in and then it slides, and you put your face in and it slides. Yeah.
It had like the weird 3 like prong like, so you had to find a table that you could like get your face to.
Yeah.
I remember playing it, and then some guy came into the video game section and bought a copy of Street Fighter 2, but he pulled out a bunch. He's like, the game will be, I don't know, like $80, and I was like, oh my god, that guy's, who is this guy? He like can pull his own money out and buy like $8 video game.
Yeah, like, I remember I like worked a whole summer to buy Chrono Trigger for the SNES. You know, because like that era of like where like most games would be like $30 or $40, but then there'd be like the $80, $70, $90 game, and like Chrono Trigger was one of those. Like, oh, this is like the game to have. Worked a whole summer, and that's
I thought that you were in a high roller game.
Yeah. Virtual Boy, it was like that was my first encounter with Wario. I don't know if there were other Wario games prior to that, but the first like Wario, the Wario game
that one
on that was like amazing. So there was that like I again like it was Toys R Us, and it was like going to the arcade. Like I go to Toys R Us and just like play as much Virtual Boy as I could before it you know before I felt like uncomfortable for just sort of like loitering, you know. There was like a vector shoot 'em up kind of game where you're like flying a spaceship through these like 3D environments and shooting and stuff.
Oh my! I wish I could play that again.
I don't think a Virtual Boy is too hard to come by now. Like it didn't quite take off. You know, there's more Virtual Boys than demand. I think. I mean, we'll have to look. Well, maybe it's like a hot item on eBay or whatever. But some things come out and they blaze a trail, and then they get drowned by their imitators. You know, and so they no longer feel original or fresh because they've been imitated to death. And you like one thing I think of is like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like there have been so many sort of like movies with that sort of like you know, like a Tomb Raider or something where they take all those little elements. So then by the time you know Spielberg and Lucas come out with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, all that stuff that they sort of that trail that they'd blazed suddenly feels, you know, derivative and old hat. But with Tron, like it was inimitable. Like no like people didn't imitate. They wouldn't dare to imitate it. and so it just kind of stands there alone. There's only one movie like that. Even the other Tron isn't like that. It's this, you know, and how rare is that in popular culture to have something that isn't you know, surrounded by imitators.
Imagine, having to choose what to see during the run in '82.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted really bad to see Tron in the theater, and I couldn't convince my dad because he had, you know, read reviews. He heard it was a stinker. So we did see E.T. At the time, I didn't think of them as sort of competitors. It was just like, oh, we're going to see E.T. Great. Come to think of it, E.T. Could be another episode because my experience with I was very little when E.T. came out, and the whole family, we were all set to go see E.T. And then I saw the poster, and I saw this like lizard arm, and I got totally freaked out. Yeah, and I was like, I don't want to see this movie. And then like I'm like on the floor, banging the floor. I do not want to see this movie. I'm screaming, like terrified of what the rest of this creature looks like. Because I just see this creepy lizard, and so like, you know, so I was terrified of E.T., but I did go in and see it, and I like the beginning of E.T. like I didn't see because I just had my eyes closed, and then eventually I start kind of peeking, and then of course I fell in love with the movie. But,
what the hell is the other end of this?
Yeah, I was freaked out.
Yeah, even with the Thing, I think it might have bombed when it came out. I think E.T. inflicted a lot of damage at the box office to other movies.
That arm is pretty scary. You know, that little light is a like destructive laser that kills you know, great sci-fi movies. You know, E.T. was a juggernaut. It was, you know, the right thing at the right time. But man, The Thing is amazing. Tron is amazing. I mean, I love E.T., but I've watched those other two movies way more times than E.T.
Yeah, his glowing finger really did the damage.
Yeah. Maybe I think there might be some like unproduced Tron 3 screenplays floating around, or like maybe we could get our hands on something like that.
I love that. That sounds great.
And maybe do an episode about that.
Somebody just delivered an arcade machine a little bit ago. Flynn's on it. Do you think we should check that out?
Let's check it out.
All right. Not what could go wrong.
Yeah, what could possibly go? You know, it's fun because a lot of people like there's like wacky packages or what. Like I've seen a lot of things, cartoons and stuff, where it's like somebody's playing the arcade game and getting sucked in, and it is funny. There is some like Mandela effect or something going on because he doesn't get sucked into the arcade machine. Like he goes to the computer lab. And he's working on a computer in the lab where there happens to be like a laser behind him that's pointed at him. So like the laser pulls him in. But then there was also like a movie called Nightmares, which was this like anthology, this like horror anthology. And one of the little stories in it was called Bishop of Battles, and it was like a video game, and it had this like character that was kind of like the MCP, and like the kid fights, and then the kid gets sucked into the arcade game. So I think maybe there's some like Mandela effect thing where people are like merging these two movies together and thinking he gets sucked into the arcade game.
The being sucked into the arcade game, being shrunk like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, or like Inner Space, like that stuff's. I'm always scared like being sent into like a world like that. That's kind of like that always freaks me out.
Well, yeah, because even like in Tron, you're sort of technically being shrunken down. Like even though you're being sent, like it's kind of like a metaphor. Like it's like I think at the time like it was sort of like a metaphor where it's like if they could create some kind of visual for like the way a computer operates, and so now Flynn is sort of set in there, and like his sort of human perceptions are piecing these things together and forming this world that kind of this model that kind of like makes sense to him to explain all these things that happen in a digital world. But then it's also like, okay, is it maybe this computer simulation that's like running inside the computer that is emulates and is connected to the processes of the computer, almost like a GUI or something, like this sort of like three-dimensional holographic GUI interface that kind of corresponds to like the actual functioning of the computer. Or it's just movie magic, where it's like we're inside a computer now, and this is what it's. So technically, you're shrunken down, but
they're like, man, how would that work?
It's one of those things like I'd been pondering from a very early age.
Yeah.
So when you're a kid, you sort of take things like there's sort of no such thing as metaphor. You sort of take everything literally, and then you grow up and you start to understand metaphor, which is probably why the movie didn't really catch on with like adults at the time, because you're kind of like, what is this? I don't get this. This is stupid. Where when you're a kid, you're like, oh yeah, he's inside a computer. Yeah, totally. I get it.
I'm on board from Jump Street.
Hey Dad, why don't you like this movie? How come you get E.T. but you don't get this? Maybe just because it had the word Disney attached to it. Like at the time, like Disney had become like almost like a dirty word of just like, oh, this is stupid kid stuff. And you watch like some of the Disney movies from like the 70s and stuff where it's like, yeah, this is shit. So it like the reputation did get, Disney's kind of I mean Disney just is sort of like the dark overlord. Like Disney basically controls entertainment and controls most of the sort of like pop culture things that I'm interested in. I mean, they bought Marvel. They control Marvel, so it's like all hail Disney. Like you have no choice. It's like they bought Star Wars and Marvel.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, they own like just about everything I care about. So it's like Disney like owns the rights to all these movies that are about like individualists fighting these like monolithic sort of like soul crushing consolidating control freaks. It's sort of like they're giving you the instructions to their own destruction.
In Tron, in Tron Legacy.
In Tron Legacy,
doesn't he get zapped?
Yeah, he
or
gets
something?
zapped into the game. It's like
I get them all mixed up.
they kind of like again kind of like symbolically deal with it, because he goes into Flynn's arcade. He goes into Flynn's arcade. Great sequence. Like I was getting goosebumps watching the movie and stuff. And then and it's all dusty, and it's like you think of how it was hustling and bustling and so 80s and so alive in the first movie. And then he, Sam Flynn, Kevin Flynn's son, comes in and it's all covered with dust and things. And then he, gets out the Space Paranoids game and they starts playing Space Paranoids. And then it like starts to like recede into the wall or something and like reveals a secret passage. And then he goes in, and then that's where like the laser and the little TRS-80 Model 1 or whatever is. And then he gets zapped.
Garrett Hedlund. I keep getting him, Sam Worthington, and Garrett Hedlund, Sam Worthington, and Liam Hemsworth. They're like the rotating like leading men.
Wish I would have opted to see it in 3D, because it's like at the time I hadn't seen any 3D movies yet. I was kind of like, it's a gimmick or whatever. But like that felt like a movie where like you gotta see it in 3D. But I didn't. I saw it.
I didn't see it in 3D either.
Oh no, yeah, and because it's got all this cool all these cool transparencies and stuff where you probably would have gotten like a real sense of space in the seeing those transparencies in 3D, seeing like the light cycles and stuff, going in different directions. But like, I don't know if this is a good movie or a bad movie. All I know is I love it. Like it's pressing all my buttons. Like it's a movie made specifically for me and my particular nostalgia. So like. If you don't have any of those things, maybe this movie's a total piece of crap to you. But to me, I'm loving it. Like I'm all in. They read my comment card. Make Tron 2. It was kind of like Ready Player One, like the novel, not the movie, but like the novel Ready Player One. Like everybody shits on it. It's blah blah blah. It's whatever. But for me, it was like that. It was like, I don't know if this is any good or not. But it's like, it's made specifically for me. Like the computer that the character had in there was like the exact computer I had when I was a kid. He's playing the same game. Yeah, it was like the TRS-80 color computer 2, and he was like obsessed with it. And it's like, that's what I had. It was so like every little detail. It was like somebody read my diary. and like made a movie specifically for me. So of course I love it. If you didn't have a Radio Shack color computer too, maybe you're not into it, but I did, and I am. So you've been watching the Tron episode of Total Recall. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tune.
And you can follow the show on Twitter at Total Recall Show or on Instagram at Total_Recall_show.